My dead girlfriend keeps messaging me on Snapchat. The notification came at 11:47 p.m. Emily's name. Emily, who died 3 years ago when her car wrapped around a telephone pole. Emily, who was 8 months pregnant with our daughter. I stared at my phone like it had just grown teeth. The message preview showed, "I'm so cold." My beer hit the floor. Glass exploded across the hardwood, but I didn't move. Couldn't move. This had to be a glitch. Some algorithmic nightmare pulling old data from the void. I'd kept her account active because deleting it felt like killing her twice. Her mom, Susan, had the login too. Maybe she'd sent something by accident. I opened the app with shaking hands, and my stomach dropped through the floor. The message wasn't from our old chat history. I'd memorized every conversation we ever had, reading them until the words burned into my brain. This was new. "I'm so cold," appeared with a timestamp from 2 minutes ago, and below it, 3 dots bounced as she typed again. My apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in while I watched those dots pulse. Another message appeared. "Why didn't you come get me?" Ice water flooded my veins. I dropped the phone on the couch and backed away from it like it might explode. This wasn't Susan. This wasn't any of Emily's friends playing a sick joke. Susan would never write something so cruel, and Emily's friends had all drifted away after the funeral when my grief became too heavy for casual conversations and sympathy cards. I grabbed my laptop and logged into Emily's Snapchat through the web browser, my fingers fumbling over the keys. The account activity showed logins from my apartment, Susan's house in Portland, and one location I didn't recognize, a coffee shop downtown called Brew Haven. I'd never been there. Susan lived 4 hours away and hadn't visited in over a year. Someone else had access to this account. Someone who knew details about Emily's death that only a handful of people could know. The coroner's report said her body temperature had dropped to dangerous levels before they found her, that she'd been trapped in the wreckage for nearly 2 hours in below-freezing weather before dying. The words, "I'm so cold," weren't random. They were specific, targeted, designed to gut me. My phone buzzed again from the couch. Another notification. Another message. I forced myself to walk back and pick it up, my heart hammering against my ribs, hard enough to hurt. The new message showed a photo. Not a new photo, but one I recognized instantly. Emily's pregnancy announcement. The same photo she'd posted to her story 3 years ago when we found out about Sophia. The same photo that had been deleted from her account months before she died because she'd gotten superstitious about sharing baby news too early. Someone had saved it. Someone had kept it. And now they were using it to destroy me. The caption read, "She would have had your eyes." I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bile and rage. 20 minutes later, I was still sitting on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub when my phone rang. Not a text. An actual call. From Emily's number. The number I'd kept active all these years, paying the monthly bill like she might need it somehow. I answered without thinking. Some desperate part of my brain convinced I'd hear her voice. Static filled my ear, thick and crackling like an old radio stuck between stations. Then breathing. Slow and deliberate. In and out. Too measured to be natural. "Who is this?" I demanded. But my voice came out broken and weak. The breathing continued for 5 more seconds before the line went dead. I checked the call log immediately. The call duration showed 0 seconds. According to my phone, that conversation never happened. I called Susan at midnight, knowing I'd wake her but not caring. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep and immediately worried. "Nathan, what's wrong?" I explained everything in a frantic rush. The messages, the photo, the call that didn't exist. She listened in silence until I finished, then said something that made the room spin. "Nathan, I haven't logged into Emily's account in over a year. I couldn't bear looking at her pictures anymore." She paused, and I heard her boyfriend murmuring something in the background. "Are you okay? Have you been drinking?" The question felt like a slap. Yes, I'd been drinking, but I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't losing my mind. I told her about the Brewhaven login, and she went quiet again. When she spoke, her voice had changed, gone careful and measured, like she was talking to someone unstable. "Maybe you should memorialize her page. Put this behind you." After I hung up, I sat on my couch and opened Emily's Snapchat profile. The memorialize option was there, just a few taps away, but my finger hovered over the screen, unable to complete the action. What if this was really Emily somehow? What if deleting access meant cutting off whatever impossible connection we still had? The thought was insane, I knew that. Dead people don't send Snapchats. Dead people don't make phone calls. But grief does strange things to logic, makes you willing to believe anything if it means holding on to someone you lost. I closed the app without memorializing anything, and opened a bottle of whiskey instead. By 3 a.m., I'd convinced myself Susan was right, that I needed help, that this was all stress and alcohol and unprocessed trauma, creating digital hallucinations. Then my phone buzzed with a new story notification. Emily had posted something. I opened it with hands that had gone numb, and the photo that appeared made me drop my phone again. It was a picture of my apartment, my living room, taken from outside my window. The angle showed my couch, my TV still playing some late-night show I'd put on for background noise, and me sitting there with the whiskey bottle. The timestamp said it was posted 30 seconds ago. I ran to the window and ripped the curtains back, searching the parking lot below for anyone with a phone or camera. Empty. Just rows of cars sleeping under orange streetlights and one stray cat picking through a tipped garbage can. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. Nobody could have taken that photo without a drone or being on a balcony that didn't exist on this side of the building. I screenshot everything. Every message, every story, every notification. Then I changed Emily's password to something completely random. A string of numbers and symbols I had to write down, because I'd never remember it. I changed the email associated with the account, the phone number, the recovery information. I activated 2-factor authentication and set it to my phone only. If someone was hacking her account, I was locking them out. The changes saved successfully, and I felt a small surge of control returning. 5 minutes later, a new message appeared in our chat. "Why are you trying to keep me out?" My screen showed I was still logged in, that these changes should have kicked out any other devices. But somehow, someone was still there, still watching, still typing. "This isn't funny anymore," I typed back. "Whoever you are, you need to stop." The response came immediately. "I can't stop. I'm stuck." 3 dots appeared again, bouncing longer this time before the next message. "The car was so cold, Nathan. It took so long. I kept calling for you, but you didn't come." My vision blurred. Emily had been driving home from work that day, her usual route down Highway 26. A patch of black ice sent her car spinning into oncoming traffic. The police said she died on impact, that she wouldn't have felt anything. But the coroner's report, the one they tried to keep from me, told a different story. She'd been conscious. She'd been alive and trapped while her car filled with freezing air through the shattered windows. The dashboard had crushed her legs, severing arteries. She bled out slowly over 90 minutes while other drivers passed by in the dark, not seeing her car in the ditch. "Stop," I typed, my hands shaking so badly I had to retype the word 3 times. "You're not her. Emily is dead. I buried her." The dots bounced again. Did you really bury me?" "Nathan? All of me?" The question felt like fingers crawling up my spine. I thought about the closed casket funeral, how Susan had insisted we not view the body because of the damage, how I'd never actually seen Emily's corpse, just signed papers and watched a box get lowered into frozen ground. I'd trusted the funeral director, trusted the death certificate, trusted that the person in that box was really my girlfriend and not just... What? What was I even thinking? This was insane. I was losing my mind on the anniversary of the worst day of my life, drinking myself stupid and letting some troll mess with my head. I threw my phone across the room and watched it hit the wall with a satisfying crack. The screen didn't shatter but spiderwebbed in one corner, and the sudden silence felt like relief. No more notifications. No more messages from dead people. I'd deal with this tomorrow when I was sober, and the sun was up, and reality felt solid again. I passed out on the couch, still wearing my clothes, the whiskey bottle empty on the floor beside me. My dreams were fragmented and cold, full of car crashes and frozen bodies, and Emily's voice calling my name from somewhere I couldn't reach. When I woke up at 6 a.m. with a splitting headache and my mouth tasting like something died in it, my phone was back on the coffee table, placed neatly in the center, screen facing up, undamaged except for that single spiderweb crack in the corner. I hadn't put it there. I'd thrown it against the wall across the room and passed out without moving. But here it was, perfectly centered on my table like someone had arranged it carefully while I slept. My apartment door was still locked from the inside, chain engaged, deadbolt turned. The windows were closed and latched. I lived alone. Nobody had keys except the building manager, and he was a 60-year-old man who couldn't climb stairs without wheezing. I picked up the phone with fingers that felt like ice and saw 17 new notifications, all from Emily, all posted while I was unconscious. I opened them with a sense of dread so heavy it felt like drowning. The first story showed a photo of me sleeping on my couch, taken from directly above. The second showed my bedroom door, slightly open. The third showed my bathroom. The fourth showed my kitchen. Someone had been in my apartment, walking through my rooms, photographing me while I was passed out drunk and vulnerable. The messages were worse. "You sleep just like you used to." Mouth open, snoring. Then, "I watched you dream. You were calling my name." Then, "I touched your face but you didn't wake up." Then, "I thought about crawling into bed beside you like before, but my body doesn't work right anymore." I ran to my bedroom and checked every corner, every closet under the bed. Nothing. I checked the bathroom, the kitchen, behind the shower curtain and inside cabinets. Empty. But my skin crawled with the certainty that I wasn't alone, that someone or something had been here, breathing my air, watching me sleep, touching my face with hands I never felt. I called the police from my landline because I didn't trust my cell anymore. Didn't trust anything digital that could be hacked or spoofed or manipulated by whoever was doing this. The 2 officers who showed up 40 minutes later were polite but skeptical. I showed them everything, the messages, the stories, the photos of my apartment taken from impossible angles. They took notes and asked questions about ex-girlfriends, angry former friends, anyone who might have a grudge. I explained Emily was dead, showed them her obituary on my laptop, and watched their expressions shift from professional interest to barely concealed pity. One of them, a younger guy with kind eyes, suggested I might want to talk to someone about grief counseling. The other, older and harder, asked if I'd given my keys to anyone recently. I hadn't. They checked my windows and doors, confirmed everything was locked, and said they'd file a report, but there wasn't much they could do without evidence of an actual crime. Creepy messages from a dead person's account weren't technically illegal, just deeply disturbing. After they left, I sat on my couch and stared at my phone. Then I did what I should have done immediately. I called Snapchat support. After navigating an automated system that clearly wasn't designed for "my dead girlfriend is haunting me," I finally reached a real person. Her name was Melissa, and she sounded tired. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, leaving out the supernatural implications and focusing on the hack angle. Someone had unauthorized access to an account. They were harassing me. I needed it shut down. Melissa asked for the username, the email, and started typing. Then she went quiet for too long. "Sir," she finally said, "I'm showing that this account has only been accessed from 2 IP addresses in the past 3 years. One registered to your apartment complex in Seattle. The other registered to a residence in Portland, Oregon. My address, Susan's address, nobody else." "That's impossible," I said. "Someone logged in from a coffee shop downtown, Brew Haven." Melissa's keyboard clicked. "I'm not seeing any login attempts from that location, sir. Are you sure you saw that?" I pulled up my laptop and logged into Emily's account again, navigating to the activity log. The Brew Haven login was gone, scrubbed, like it never existed. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered, more to myself than to Melissa. She made a sympathetic sound. "Sir, I need to ask, are you the only person with access to this phone? Is there any chance you sent these messages to yourself and don't remember?" The question hit like a physical blow. Was I losing time? Having blackouts? I'd been drinking heavily, barely sleeping. My grief counselor had warned me about dissociative episodes. But no, I didn't take those photos of myself sleeping. I didn't place my phone back on the table. I wasn't capable of that level of self-delusion. I hung up on Melissa and immediately called Susan again. She answered faster this time, worry clear in her voice. "Nathan, it's 7 a.m. What's wrong?" I told her about the night, the photos, the police, Snapchat's records showing only our IP addresses. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, her silence stretched so long I thought the call dropped. "Susan?" Finally she spoke, her words careful. "Nathan, I need you to be honest with me. Have you been taking your medication?" I didn't have medication. I'd refused antidepressants after Emily died because I wanted to feel everything, even the pain. But Susan didn't know that. I'd let her believe I was getting professional help, taking prescriptions, doing all the things grieving people are supposed to do. "Why would you ask me that?" I said, too sharp. "Because," she said slowly, "Emily's therapist told me something before the accident. About her mental health, about things she was experiencing." The world tilted. "What things?" Susan's breath hitched. "She was having paranoid episodes, thinking people were watching her, following her. Her therapist wanted to adjust her medications, but Emily kept skipping appointments." She paused. "The week before she died, Emily called me at 2 a.m. saying someone was in her apartment. She was convinced they'd been there for hours, watching her sleep. The police came. Nobody was there. They found her sitting in her car outside in the parking lot, too scared to go back inside. I'd never known this. Emily had never told me. We lived together that year, shared a bed every night. How had I missed signs of paranoia severe enough that she'd call the police?" Susan continued. "Her therapist thought it might be postpartum psychosis starting early, triggered by pregnancy hormones. They wanted to hospitalize her, but Emily refused. The pieces were rearranging themselves in my head, forming a pattern I didn't want to see." "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. Susan's voice broke. "I'm saying maybe this runs in families. Maybe you're experiencing something similar. The stress, the anniversary, the grief. Nathan, nobody is messaging you from Emily's account. I think you need help." I hung up without responding and threw the phone again, harder this time. It bounced off the couch and skittered under the coffee table. I was not crazy. I was not hallucinating. Someone was doing this to me, someone real and malicious, and I was going to find them. I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Emily's therapist was named Dr. Rebecca Winters. I found her practice online and called the emergency line, leaving a rambling message about needing Emily's medical records, about understanding her condition, about proving I wasn't losing my mind like everyone thought. Dr. Winters called back within an hour, her voice professional but firm. Patient confidentiality prevented her from discussing Emily's case, even posthumously, without proper legal documentation. "But Susan said Emily was paranoid," I pressed, "that she thought people were watching her. Was that real? Was someone actually stalking her?" Dr. Winters was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Carver, I can't discuss specifics, but I can tell you that sometimes our brains create threats as a way of processing trauma we're not ready to face. Emily experienced something difficult before her pregnancy, something she wasn't ready to confront. Her mind found other explanations for what she was feeling." My hands were shaking again. What trauma? What happened to her? But Dr. Winters had already said too much. She suggested I make an appointment for myself, gave me a referral number, and ended the call with careful sympathy that felt like condescension. I pulled up Emily's old journal, the one she'd kept on her laptop that Susan gave me after the funeral. I'd only read it once before, finding the grief too raw. But now I searched for entries from the year before her death, looking for anything about stalkers or paranoia or things she hadn't told me. Most entries were mundane: work complaints, baby name ideas, worries about being a good mother. But then I found an entry from February, 8 months before the accident. He was there again today. Same coffee shop, same corner table. When I looked directly at him, he smiled, like he knew I'd finally noticed. I wanted to take a picture, but I was scared he'd see me. Nathan thinks I'm being paranoid, but I know what I saw. I know. My stomach clenched. She'd never mentioned this to me. Never said anything about being followed. I kept reading. March. Changed my route to work, but he found me anyway. How does he keep finding me? I'm starting to think maybe I'm losing it. Maybe the baby is making me crazy like my mom said could happen. April. Nathan caught me crying in the shower today. I told him it was hormones. I can't tell him about the watcher because he'll think I'm insane. Maybe I am. Maybe there's nobody there and I'm just broken. The entries stopped after that. Her last entry was from the morning of her death. Doctor appointment today. They want to talk about my episodes again. I'm not crazy. I know someone's been watching me. I found proof, but there was no mention of what proof. No photos, no names, no details. Just that one line and then nothing. She died 6 hours later on Highway 26, her car spinning on black ice that shouldn't have been there in October, except the weather reports from that day showed temperatures well above freezing. No ice, no precipitation. Just clear skies and dry roads. So what made her crash? I'd never questioned the police report before, too buried in grief to think critically about the circumstances. But now, doubt crept in like cold water. What if Emily's crash wasn't an accident? What if the person she thought was watching her was real? What if they'd caused the crash? And what if they were now coming after me? I searched for Emily's phone, the one that had been recovered from the wreckage. Susan had given me a box of her belongings after the funeral: jewelry, her wallet, some clothes. But I didn't remember seeing her phone. I tore through my closet, finding the box shoved in the back behind winter coats I never wore. Inside was everything I remembered except the phone. I called Susan. Did Emily's phone survive the crash? She had to think about it. I'm not sure. The police gave me a bag of her things from the car. There might have been a phone. I gave you everything they gave me, but she hadn't. I'd gone through this box a dozen times and there was no phone. Someone had taken it, or it had never been returned. I called the police department's non-emergency line, and after being transferred 3 times, reached the evidence department. The clerk found Emily's case file and confirmed a phone had been recovered. An iPhone 11, severely damaged but potentially recoverable. It had been held as evidence for 6 months, and then, nothing. No record of disposal or return to family. Can I get it back? I asked. I was her boyfriend. We lived together. The clerk made sympathetic sounds. I can check with my supervisor, but typically personal effects are returned to next of kin. That would be her mother, Susan Hartley. I asked him to check anyway, gave him my contact information, and hung up feeling like I'd hit another dead end. Then I remembered Emily's cloud backup. She'd been religious about backing up her phone, paranoid about losing photos. If her phone data was in the cloud, I might be able to access it. I grabbed my laptop and logged into the iCloud account we'd shared for music and photos. Her backup was there, last updated the day she died. I started downloading everything: photos, messages, app data. It took 20 minutes and the whole time my hands wouldn't stop shaking. What if I found proof she was being stalked? What if I found nothing and confirmed I was as delusional as Susan thought? The messages loaded first. Text conversations with me, with Susan, with her friends. Nothing unusual until I found a thread with an unknown number. The messages started 3 months before her death. Unknown. You looked beautiful today. The blue dress was a good choice. Emily. Who is this? Unknown. Someone who appreciates you more than he does. The messages escalated from there. Compliments that turned possessive. Questions about her schedule. Photos of her taken from a distance at work, at the grocery store, outside our apartment. Emily had never responded after that first message, but the unknown number kept sending photos, kept messaging her daily. The last message came the morning of her death. Don't go to the doctor today. They'll try to take you away from me. Stay home. Stay safe. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll. Emily had been stalked. Really stalked by someone dangerous enough that she'd hidden it from everyone, maybe thinking she could handle it alone. I tried calling the unknown number, but it went straight to a disconnected message. I reverse searched it online and found nothing. Whoever this was had used a burner or a spoofed number, but the photos were real. I could see Emily in them, clear as day, living her life while someone documented her movements. I downloaded everything to a flash drive and called the police back, asking to speak with whoever handled Emily's accident investigation. They transferred me to Detective Walsh, who remembered the case. Single vehicle accident, he said. Black ice? Speed. Unfortunate timing. What's your question? I told him about the messages, the stalking, the timing of Emily's crash. Walsh listened patiently, and then said something that made my blood run cold. Mr. Carver, we investigated thoroughly. There was no evidence of foul play. The accident reconstruction showed she was traveling at high speed and overcorrected when she hit the ice patch. But there was no ice. The weather was clear. Are you sure? I pressed. Walsh's voice cooled. I've been doing this 19 years. I know how to investigate a traffic fatality. I'm sorry for your loss, but sometimes accidents are just accidents. He hung up before I could argue further. I sat there with my laptop open, staring at the stalker's messages, and felt pieces clicking together in my head. Emily was being stalked. She crashed under suspicious circumstances. The stalker's messages stopped after her death. But 3 years later, someone starts messaging me from her account, using details only a stalker would know. What if the person who killed Emily was back? What if they'd been quiet for 3 years, and something had triggered them to start again? The anniversary. Today was exactly 3 years since her death. I pulled up Emily's Snapchat and started scrolling through the messages again, looking for patterns. The person writing these knew things they shouldn't. They knew about the cold, about Emily being trapped, about her pregnancy. Then I saw something that made me stop breathing. One of the earlier messages. I watched you dream. You were calling my name. That wasn't about Emily. That was about me. The stalker had been in my apartment, watching me sleep, just like they'd watched Emily. I grabbed my phone and opened the photos from last night, the ones showing my apartment from inside. I zoomed in on each image, looking for reflections, for anything that might show who took them. In the photo of my bedroom, barely visible in the dark TV screen's reflection, was a shape, a person standing in my doorway. I enhanced the image as much as my phone would allow, and my heart stopped. The figure was wearing a dark hoodie, face obscured, but something about the build, the posture, triggered recognition I couldn't quite place. I'd seen this person before. Where? I scrolled through Emily's stalker photos from 3 years ago and found it. Same hoodie, same posture. Same person who'd photographed Emily in parking lots and grocery stores was now in my apartment. My apartment suddenly felt contaminated, like the walls were closing in. I grabbed my keys and wallet and ran. Didn't matter where, just out, away from this space where someone had stood over me while I slept. I drove aimlessly for an hour, checking my rearview mirror constantly for cars that might be following. The morning traffic was heavy, and every vehicle felt like a threat. Finally, I pulled into a 24-hour diner and sat in a back booth where I could watch the entrance. My phone buzzed. New Snapchat message. My hands hesitated over the phone, afraid of what I'd see. I opened it anyway. Running won't help. I know where you go. I've always known. Attached was a photo taken through the diner's front window, of me, sitting in this booth, taken 30 seconds ago. I dropped the phone and bolted to the window, scanning the parking lot. Empty except for a few scattered cars and one person sitting in a dark sedan 3 spaces from mine. I couldn't see their face through the tinted windows. I ran outside, pulling my keys between my knuckles like a weapon. The sedan's engine started as I approached. I got close enough to slap the hood and shout, "Stop!" But the car reversed fast, tires squealing, and peeled out of the parking lot before I could get the license plate. My chest heaved with adrenaline and fear. This was real. Someone was following me, photographing me, terrorizing me the same way they'd terrorized Emily. And unlike Emily, I wasn't going to stay quiet about it. I called Detective Walsh back, left a frantic voicemail about the stalker, the photos, the car that just fled. Then I called Susan and told her everything I'd found in Emily's cloud backup. She listened in shocked silence as I described the unknown number, the stalker photos, the suspicious timing of the crash. "Why didn't she tell me?" Susan's voice broke. "Why didn't she tell anyone?" Because she thought no one would believe her, just like everyone thought I was crazy now. I drove to the police station and demanded to file a formal report. The desk sergeant looked skeptical, but took my information and had me wait. 20 minutes later, Detective Walsh appeared looking annoyed. "Mr. Carver, I got your voicemail. Let's talk in my office." He led me to a small room with gray walls and a single table. I showed him everything: Emily's stalker messages, the photos from my apartment, the image of the figure in my doorway, the sedan fleeing the diner. Walsh examined each photo carefully, and I watched his expression shift from skepticism to concern. "You're saying the person who stalked your girlfriend 3 years ago is now stalking you?" I nodded. "And you think they caused her accident?" Walsh set the phone down. "I'll be honest, Mr. Carver. Reopening a 3-year-old case requires significant new evidence. What you've shown me is disturbing, but not conclusive. The messages could be someone who knew Emily, maybe another family member with access to her account." "It's not family," I insisted. "Someone was in my apartment last night. They took photos of me sleeping." Walsh nodded slowly. "We can investigate the break-in. Did you notice any signs of forced entry? Anything missing?" Nothing was forced. Nothing was missing. Just photos taken from impossible angles, and my phone moved while I was passed out drunk. Walsh was already losing interest. I could see it in his eyes. Just another grieving boyfriend who couldn't let go, who was seeing patterns where none existed. "What about Emily's phone?" I asked. "The one from the accident. Your evidence department doesn't know where it is." That got his attention. "What do you mean?" I explained the missing phone, the clerk who couldn't find disposal or return records. Walsh frowned and made a note. "I'll look into that. But Mr. Carver, I need you to understand something. Stalking cases are difficult to prove. Anonymous messages and photos aren't enough for an arrest unless we can identify who's sending them. I left the police station feeling defeated and paranoid. Every car that passed might contain the stalker. Every person on the sidewalk might be watching me. I drove home, taking a random route, checking mirrors constantly, and parked 3 blocks away from my building just in case. I entered through the back stairwell instead of the main entrance and took the stairs instead of the elevator, listening for footsteps behind me. My apartment looked exactly how I'd left it, but I checked every room anyway, every closet and corner, before locking the door and pushing my couch against it for extra security. My phone sat on the coffee table where I'd left it. I picked it up with shaking hands. 17 new messages from Emily's account. I opened them knowing each one would be worse than the last. You went to the police. That was a mistake. Then, they won't believe you. They never believed her either. Then, I know what you're thinking. You think you can find me. You can't. Then, but I can always find you. The next message made my blood freeze. I'm disappointed in you, Nathan. After everything we've been through, you still don't understand. We? What we? Then the messages continued. I loved her so much. More than you ever did. You were always working, always tired, always taking her for granted. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. She was going to leave you. Did you know that? She told me one night when you were working late. She said you'd grown distant, that the pregnancy had changed everything, that she didn't know if she loved you anymore. This was a lie. It had to be. Emily loved me. We were planning a future together, but doubt crept in like poison. Had she really been happy? Had I been blind to problems in our relationship? The messages kept coming. I could have made her so happy. I would have worshipped her. But you were always there, always in the way. So I removed you. My heart stopped. Not physically, not yet. But I made her see you differently. I sent her messages pretending to be your ex-girlfriend. Told her you were cheating. Planted seeds of doubt. That's why she was distant those last few months. That's why she stopped saying I love you as often. Because you poisoned her against me? I typed back, knowing I shouldn't engage, but unable to stop myself. The response came immediately. I freed her from illusion. Showed her who you really were. But then she got scared. Started talking about going to police, about getting a restraining order against me. I couldn't let her do that. The next message came with a photo attached. Emily's car, wrapped around the telephone pole, steam rising from the crushed hood. But the angle was wrong. This wasn't a photo taken by first responders or news crews. This was taken by someone standing right there, close enough to see into the car, close enough to see Emily. I waited until she was unconscious before I called 911. Made sure she couldn't tell anyone what really happened. Made sure the story would be just another tragic accident. My vision blurred with rage and tears. This person had killed Emily, watched her die, and now they were confessing through her own Snapchat account like it was a joke. Who are you? I typed. I need to know who you are. The response took longer this time. 3 minutes of bouncing dots before. You already know. You just don't want to admit it. What? I didn't know any stalkers. Didn't know anyone obsessed enough to kill. The messages continued. Think about who had access to her account. Who knew her password? Who was there the day she died? Ice flooded my veins. Susan? I typed, my hands shaking. No, try again. The next message came with another photo. This one was from Emily's funeral. The church packed with mourners in black, but zoomed in on one face in the back row. A young guy I didn't recognize, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair and hollow eyes staring directly at Emily's casket. Look closer, the message said. I zoomed in further, and my breath caught. The guy's jacket had a logo, Brew Haven Coffee, the same coffee shop that had shown up in Emily's login history before the record disappeared. I screenshot the photo and used reverse image search. Nothing came up. I posted it to a Reddit thread about unsolved stalking cases, asking if anyone recognized the person. Responses came within minutes. One user said, "That's definitely someone from the Seattle area. I've seen that face somewhere." Another linked to a news article from 4 years ago about a coffee shop employee arrested for installing hidden cameras in the women's bathroom. The employee's name was Julian Cross. The photo in the article matched the face from Emily's funeral, Julian Cross. I searched for everything I could find about him. The bathroom camera charges had been dropped due to a technicality, but he'd been fired from Brewhaven. After that, his digital footprint vanished. No social media, no employment records, nothing. Like he'd deliberately erased himself, or learned to hide better. I found one more thing. A restraining order filed by a woman named Isabel Kemp 2 years before Emily died. Isabel claimed Julian had been stalking her for months, showing up at her work, sending threatening messages, breaking into her apartment. The restraining order expired after 1 year, and there were no follow-up reports. I searched for Isabel Kemp, and my stomach dropped. She died in a car accident 18 months before Emily. Single vehicle crash, on a clear day. The similarities were impossible to ignore. I called Detective Walsh immediately, barely able to speak through my panic. Julian Cross. He killed Emily and he's been stalking me. He killed another woman the same way before Emily. You need to find him. Walsh took down the information and promised to investigate, but I could hear the skepticism still in his voice. How many boyfriends called him with wild theories about their girlfriend's accidents? I pulled up property records and found where Julian had lived 4 years ago, an apartment complex 3 blocks from where Emily and I used to live, close enough to watch her daily routine, close enough to learn her schedule, close enough to become obsessed, but his current address wasn't listed anywhere. He'd completely disappeared. My phone buzzed. Another message. "You're getting warmer. Want to know where I am now?" I didn't respond. Couldn't. My entire body had locked up with fear. The message continued. "I'm closer than you think. I've always been close. That's how love works, Nathan. Real love means never being apart." Another photo appeared. My building's parking lot, my car, taken from directly behind my apartment window. He was here, right now. Outside, or maybe even inside. I grabbed a kitchen knife and moved toward the window, staying low. I peeked through the curtain and saw nothing unusual, just empty parking spaces and streetlights. But he was watching somehow. Had to be. I checked every window lock, every door, pushed furniture against them all. My apartment became a barricaded fortress, and I sat in the center with my knife and phone, waiting for something to happen. At 3 a.m., my phone rang. Emily's number. I answered with the knife gripped in my other hand. "Hello?" Static filled my ear again, thick and crackling. Then a voice. Male, soft, almost gentle. "You should have let her go, Nathan. Should have moved on like people are supposed to. But you kept her account active. Kept her alive in little digital pieces. That's how I knew you'd understand." My voice came out hoarse. "Understand what?" The voice continued like I hadn't spoken. "True love doesn't die. It transforms. Emily couldn't be mine in life, so I made her mine in death. And now you're keeping her alive for me. Sending her messages. Looking at her photos. Keeping the connection open." I wanted to vomit. "You're insane." The voice laughed. A sound like breaking glass. "Probably. But I'm also right outside your door." The call ended. I stared at my apartment door, watching the handle slowly turn. Someone was trying to get in. The furniture I'd pushed against it held firm, but the handle kept turning, testing, searching for weakness. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers and whispered my address, the situation. "Please hurry." The handle stopped moving. Footsteps retreated down the hallway, casual and unhurried. I heard the emergency stairwell door open and close. Whoever it was had left, confident they could come back any time. The police arrived 12 minutes later. They searched the building and found nothing. No Julian Cross, no suspicious vehicles, no evidence anyone had tried to enter my apartment. The responding officer suggested I install a better lock and maybe consider a security system. After they left, I sat against my barricaded door and cried for the first time since Emily's funeral. Not gentle crying, but deep, body-shaking sobs that hurt my chest and made breathing feel impossible. I'd failed to protect Emily, failed to see she was being stalked, failed to question her death, and now I was being hunted by the same person, experiencing the same fear she'd lived with for months before dying. The guilt was crushing, if I'd noticed. If I'd listened better, paid more attention, asked more questions, she might still be alive. Morning came gray and cold. I hadn't slept, just sat against the door with the knife across my lap. My phone showed 37 new messages from Emily's account. I opened them with numb fingers. They chronicled Julian's entire stalking history with Emily, where he'd seen her first, Brewhaven, she'd ordered a vanilla latte, how he'd learned her schedule, followed her for 2 weeks, how he'd gotten her number, hacked the coffee shop's customer database. Every intimate detail of his obsession spelled out like a confession he wanted me to read. The final message said, "Now it's your turn. I'm going to know everything about you, Nathan. Your schedule, your routines, your fears. And when I'm ready, when the time is right, you'll have an accident too. Just like Emily, just like Isabel. The police will call it tragic. Susan will cry. And I'll be at your funeral in the back row, watching them lower you into the ground next to her." I forwarded everything to Detective Walsh and left a voicemail begging him to act on this. Julian Cross was confessing to murder through a dead woman's Snapchat account. This had to be enough evidence. Then I packed a bag and left my apartment. I couldn't stay there anymore, not knowing Julian could access it somehow, could watch me sleep, could stand in my doorway planning my death. I drove to a hotel on the other side of Seattle and paid cash for a room under a fake name. No credit cards, no paper trail. I turned off my phone's location services and GPS. If Julian was tracking me electronically, I was going dark. But the messages kept coming even in the hotel room. "New place? Nice try. I can still see you." Another photo. The hotel parking lot. My car. He'd followed me. Or maybe he was tracking my phone somehow despite the disabled location. I threw the phone against the wall hard enough to shatter it completely this time. The screen went black and stayed black. Silence. Finally. Blessed silence. I bought a burner phone from a gas station and called Detective Walsh from it. He answered, sounding tired. "Mr. Carver, I got your messages. We're actively investigating Julian Cross, but I need you to understand he's not an easy person to find. He doesn't have an active address, no employment records, no digital footprint. It's like he's a ghost, because he'd learned to be invisible, learned from his mistakes with Isabel. He's confessing to murder, I said. The messages I sent you, Walsh interrupted. Those messages could be from anyone with access to Emily's account. They're not admissible evidence without proof Julian Cross sent them. We need to physically locate him, question him, gather forensic evidence. Frustration made my voice sharp. So you're just going to let him stalk me until he kills me? That's your plan? Walsh's voice stayed professional, but I heard the strain. We're doing everything we can. In the meantime, stay somewhere safe. Don't go to work. Don't follow routines. Make yourself hard to find. I laughed bitterly. He found me at a random hotel 3 hours after I checked in. He's not tracking my routines. He's tracking me. The line was quiet for too long. Then Walsh said something that made my skin crawl. Mr. Carver, have you considered that maybe Julian Cross has been close to you this whole time? That maybe he's someone you already know? The thought hit me like ice water. I ran through everyone in my life. Co-workers, neighbors, old friends, Emily's friends. Could any of them be Julian? I'd seen photos of him from 4 years ago, but people changed. Hair, weight, facial hair. He could be anyone now. I thanked Walsh and hung up, then sat on the hotel bed feeling paranoid about every person I'd encountered recently. The grocery store clerk who smiled too long. The guy at the gym who always seemed to be on the machine next to mine. My downstairs neighbor who sometimes stood in the parking lot staring at our building. Any of them could be Julian wearing a different face. Without a phone, I felt disconnected from the world. I bought a cheap laptop from a pawn shop and logged into Emily's Snapchat from the hotel's Wi-Fi. The messages were still coming even though I'd destroyed my phone, which meant Julian was sending them to the account, not to my device specifically. He expected me to check, expected me to be unable to resist reading his confessions and threats. The newest message said, "Destroying your phone won't help. I'll just wait for you to get a new one. Or you can keep checking here like you're doing right now." He knew. Somehow he knew I was reading this from a laptop in a hotel. Unless... I pulled up the laptop's webcam settings and found what I should have looked for immediately. The camera was active, recording. Julian could see me right now, sitting on this hotel bed, reading his messages. I slammed the laptop shut and covered the webcam with duct tape, my heart hammering. I spent the next week moving between cheap motels, never staying anywhere more than one night. I paid cash for everything, used different names, kept the laptop's camera covered, but the messages kept finding me. Red Roof Inn on Highway 99. Interesting choice. That diner across from the Shell station makes good pancakes, doesn't it? You look tired this morning. You should sleep more. He was tracking me somehow. Through my laptop, through security cameras at these places, through physical surveillance I never noticed. I started walking everywhere instead of driving, taking buses with no set route, changing clothes in public bathrooms to alter my appearance. The paranoia was consuming me the same way it had consumed Emily. Now I understood why she'd hidden it from everyone. Admitting you're being stalked means admitting you're not safe, that someone has stripped away your privacy and control, and most people can't handle hearing that truth. They want you to just be careful, or call the police, like those are real solutions. Detective Walsh called my burner phone on day 9 of running. We found Julian Cross's last known apartment. Landlord said he left 8 months ago without notice, abandoned everything inside. We're processing it now. I asked what they'd found, and Walsh hesitated. Surveillance equipment, cameras, microphones, recording devices, and walls covered with photos. I knew the answer before I asked. Photos of who? Walsh's voice was grim. Emily, hundreds of them, from over 3 years ago. But there were recent photos, too. Of you, your apartment, your car, your daily routes. This guy has been watching you for a while, Mr. Carver. My legs went weak. I sat down on the motel bed, feeling sick. How long? Walsh's pause told me everything. Based on timestamps on the digital files, he started photographing you the day after Emily's funeral. 3 years ago. He's been documenting your life ever since. 3 years. Julian had been watching me for 3 years, studying my grief, my routines, my entire existence, and I'd never known, never felt his eyes on me, never suspected. Why wait so long? I asked. If he wanted to kill me, why wait 3 years? Walsh had a theory. Control. He gets off on the power dynamic, watching you grieve for someone he killed, knowing he could end you any time and you wouldn't see it coming. The messages only started recently because something changed. Maybe you started moving on. Maybe he felt like he was losing that control. The anniversary. I'd been thinking about dating again before the anniversary hit. Had even gone on one awkward coffee date with a woman from work. Had Julian seen that? Was this his way of pulling me back into his web? Walsh continued. We're putting out a bolo for Julian Cross. Every officer in the state will be looking for him. We've got his photo circulating. But Mr. Carver, you need to stay hidden until we find him. I promised I would and hung up. Then I made a decision that was either brave or suicidal. I was done running. Done letting Julian control my life. If he wanted me, he could come get me. But I'd be ready. I rented a cabin 3 hours outside Seattle, isolated and surrounded by woods. One road in, one road out. I installed security cameras, motion sensors, and bought a handgun from a private seller who didn't ask questions. I learned to shoot using YouTube videos, practicing until my hands stopped shaking every time I held the weapon. Then I logged into Emily's Snapchat, and sent a message for the first time in 3 years. "You want me? I'm done hiding. Come find me." I attached the cabin's address, then I waited. For 2 days, nothing happened. No response, no messages. The silence was somehow worse than the threats. On the third day, my motion sensors triggered at 2 a.m. Something was approaching through the woods. I pulled up the camera feeds and saw a figure moving between trees, deliberately staying in shadows. The figure reached the cabin's clearing and stopped, just standing there watching the dark windows. I turned on every light and stepped outside, holding my gun with both hands. "Julian Cross, I know it's you. Come out where I can see you." The figure moved forward into the light and my breath caught. It wasn't a man. It was a woman. Early 30s, dark hair, hollow eyes that looked familiar but I couldn't place them. She held her empty hands up, showing she wasn't armed. "Nathan Carver?" Her voice was hoarse, like she hadn't used it in a while. I kept the gun trained on her center mass. "Who are you?" She took another step closer, and I saw it then, the resemblance. She looked like Emily. Not identical, but similar enough that my brain tried to make the connection. "My name is Isabel Kemp," she said, and my world tilted. "I know you think I'm dead. Julian wanted everyone to think that, but I survived my accident. I've been hiding for 2 years, waiting for a chance to stop him." Isabel, the woman who'd filed a restraining order against Julian, the woman whose car accident I'd read about. "You're supposed to be dead," I said stupidly. She nodded. "I was legally declared dead after they found my car in the river, but I crawled out before it sank, hid in the woods for 3 days before making it to a highway. By then the news was reporting my death and I realized Julian would come after me again if he knew I survived. She told me everything. How Julian had stalked her for 8 months, escalating from messages to breaking into her apartment to tampering with her car's brakes. The night of her accident, he'd cut her brake lines and followed her at a distance, watching her lose control on a curve. She'd crashed through a guardrail into a river, but the airbag saved her long enough to escape before the car submerged. Instead of going to police, she'd run, changed her identity, lived off-grid ever since. "Why didn't you report him?" I demanded. Isabel's laugh was bitter. "I tried. Police said my brake lines could have corroded naturally, that my reports sounded paranoid, that I should consider therapy. The restraining order was the best I could get, and Julian just saw that as a game. After the accident, I realized the system couldn't protect me, so I protected myself by disappearing." She pulled out a phone and showed me photos. Julian Cross, older now but still recognizable, outside my apartment last week, outside the hotel I'd stayed at, following me through Seattle's streets with a patient predator's focus. "I've been tracking him," Isabel said, "trying to gather enough evidence for police to act, but he's careful, never leaves forensics, never gets caught on clear camera footage. He's learned from his mistakes." I lowered my gun slightly. "Why are you here?" Isabel met my eyes. "Because he's planning to kill you this week. I hacked into his laptop, found a file called Nathan Final. It has detailed plans for staging your accident. He's going to use the same method he used on Emily, black ice simulation. Special solution sprayed on the road that freezes on contact. Your car hits it, spins out, he's standing by to make sure you don't survive. He's planned it for tomorrow night." My hands started shaking again. "Tomorrow night, less than 24 hours. Then we go to the police with this," I said. "With your testimony and the hacked files?" Isabel shook her head. "Illegally obtained evidence. Won't hold up in court. His lawyer would get it thrown out. We needed to catch Julian in the act, with witnesses, with undeniable proof. Isabel had a plan, but it was insane. We'd stage my death exactly how Julian planned it, but record everything. Get him on camera approaching my accident, confessing, doing anything that would incriminate him, then spring the trap with police standing by. Detective Walsh thought we were crazy when I called him from the cabin, but when Isabel explained who she was and showed her ID, Walsh went quiet. "Isabel Kemp? You're supposed to be dead." She explained everything again while Walsh listened. Finally, he said, "This is entrapment. Anything we catch might not be admissible." Isabel's voice stayed firm. "Then we make sure it's not entrapment. Nathan drives his normal route tomorrow night. I make sure cameras are positioned along the road. If Julian shows up and causes an accident, we'll have everything on video. If he doesn't, we'll know my intel was wrong." Walsh clearly hated this plan, but after 3 years of Julian operating freely, he was desperate enough to try anything. "I'll position unmarked units along the route. But Mr. Carver, if this goes wrong, you could actually die." I knew. But I also knew I couldn't keep running forever. Eventually Julian would get his chance, and if I was going to die, I'd rather it be on my terms with a chance of taking him down too. We spent all day setting up. Cameras hidden in trees, on poles, on cars parked strategically along the route. Isabel walked me through the plan a dozen times, where the black ice solution would be sprayed, where Julian would be hiding, how to lose control safely without actually dying. Walsh positioned 5 unmarked cars within 2-minute response distance. Night fell cold and clear. I got in my car at 9 p.m. and started driving the route Julian expected me to take. The highway was empty this late, just me and occasional truckers passing in the opposite direction. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to hurt. Every shadow could be Julian. Every parked car a threat. At 9:47 p.m., my headlights caught something on the road ahead, a slick patch that reflected light wrong. The black ice solution. Isabel's voice crackled through the earpiece I wore. That's it. Hit it going 60. Turn into the spin like I showed you. My heart hammered as I accelerated. The car hit the slick patch and immediately lost traction. I turned into the spin, but momentum carried me toward the guardrail. The impact was harder than I expected, whiplash snapping my head forward despite the seatbelt. My airbag deployed with a gunshot sound that left my ears ringing. Through cracked windshield, I saw a figure approaching from the tree line. Julian. He walked calmly, like he had all the time in the world, and pulled out a phone to photograph my car, just like he'd photographed Emily's, just like he'd photographed Isabel's. I stayed slumped over the wheel, playing unconscious. Julian reached my door and tried the handle. Locked. He pulled out a tool to break the window, and that's when Walsh's voice came through my earpiece. Go now! Unmarked cars flooded the scene from both directions, lights blazing. Julian froze for 1 second, then ran. But Isabel was faster, tackling him from the side before he made it 10 feet. They went down hard, and I heard her screaming, "This is for 2 years of running! For Emily! For every woman you've terrorized!" Police pulled her off Julian before she could do permanent damage. I watched through my cracked windshield as they cuffed him, read him his rights, and loaded him into a cruiser. His eyes found mine through the window, and he smiled. Actually smiled like this was all still part of his plan. Then Walsh was at my door, helping me out of the car, asking if I was hurt. I wasn't. Bruised, shaken, but alive. Behind Walsh, I saw Isabel standing with police, giving her statement, officially returning from the dead to testify against her stalker. The trial took 8 months. Julian's lawyers tried everything, claiming the black ice was natural, that his presence at my crash was coincidental, that the photos of Emily and me were just those of an overzealous true crime enthusiast. But Isabel's testimony destroyed him. She detailed every aspect of his stalking pattern, how he'd faked her death, how he'd confessed in messages about Emily's murder. The Snapchat records showed his IP address on messages I'd received. The cameras caught him tampering with my car earlier that day. Forensic analysis of Emily's car found traces of the same black ice solution on her tires. The jury took 3 hours to convict him of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. Life without parole. I testified on the last day, describing how Julian had stolen 3 years of my life by taking Emily and then haunting me with her own account. The judge called Julian's crimes a calculated campaign of terror that spans years and destroys lives. Julian never showed remorse, just stared at me with those hollow eyes like he still had some secret I didn't know. Isabel and I became friends after the trial, bonded by trauma and survival. She moved back to Seattle using her real identity, and we'd meet sometimes for coffee, talking about anything except Julian. Susan finally got closure about Emily's death, though the knowing was almost worse than the mystery had been. We memorialized Emily's account together, removing her from social media and letting her rest. I kept one folder of her photos on an encrypted drive, things I didn't want to forget. Her laugh, her smile, the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching. The nightmares still come some nights. I dream about Emily trapped in her car calling for help that won't arrive in time. But I also dream about her happy, pregnant, planning the future we'd never have. Those dreams hurt worse. A year after Julian's conviction, I scattered Emily's ashes like she'd wanted, at the beach where we had our first date. Susan came with me, and we stood in silence watching the gray dust mix with white sand and disappear. That night, I finally slept without dreaming, and woke up feeling lighter than I had in 4 years. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.